Good morning. It is Thursday, the 5th of February. I'm Maeve McMahon and this is Europe Today, your daily dose of European news and analysis, live here on Euronews. Coming up, the EU has agreed on a much-needed 90 billion cash injection for war-torn Ukraine. This as the tables begin to slightly turn on Vladimir Putin's diplomatic isolation. Estonia, Latvia and Luxembourg are now joining calls by France, Austria, the Czech Republic and Italy to re-engage in communications with the Kremlin. Diplomatic ties broke down in February 2022 after Russia's illegal full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Meanwhile, a second day of US-led peace talks get underway today in the United Arab Emirates. Our EU editor Maria Tadeo reports now from there.
Good morning. Indeed, talks between Russia and Ukraine took place last night in Abu Dhabi, brokered by the United States of America. Ukrainian source saying that the talks were, quote, constructive, but the European Union still not at the negotiating table. And that is bringing up a fundamental question. What's it going to take for the EU to be represented? Also, last night, revelations that the main diplomat for the French president, Emmanuel Macron, traveled to Moscow this week. The French president has been saying now, as you know, for weeks that the Europeans need to establish now a sort of direct communication diplomatic channel with both Ukraine and Russia to be able to inject momentum into negotiations, and the technical talks, at least on a technical level, should begin as soon as possible. To that extent, we spoke with the Prime Minister of Latvia, Vika Selina, here at the World Governments Forum, and she told us it is clear that someone at this stage will have to be appointed to be this EU special envoy, someone that is respected by Ukraine, also the EU 27, but in particular playing a coordination role so that the EU is represented at the table. Let's take a look.
We started this negotiation about, yes, we really need an envoy. Probably the question is who it will be. And I think we have many options. I'm ready to go if it's needed. But I think as well European leaders from Germany or France should be the ones, as well as UK, which is a member of Coalition of Willing, should be the ones who are actually at the table together with Americans, helping Ukraine to be in those very tough negotiations.
So just so we understand, and Europeans obviously watching our show understand, there was a time in which the idea of talking directly to Russia was seen as a negative thing. There was the idea that Russia had to be isolated as a punishment for starting the war. What you're saying now is that approach needs to change, and it's not something dramatic of negative. Talking to Russia now, it's simply realpolitik. The EU needs to engage with them.
I think the EU needs to engage in diplomacy. You always need to talk, but we need to isolate and still, yes, have sanctions on Russia, have this push on Russia's income for them to not be able to boost up their military, because they're attacking Ukrainians. Why they're freezing? That's because Russia is still attacking just the innocent people. And that is where we need to isolate Russia even more, not just European countries, but all of the countries. But we have to be on negotiations table because Ukrainians themselves has started negotiate. So why should Europeans not to negotiate?
Do you have an idea, a profile, someone that would make the 27 feel comfortable and represented? It's a tough job to fill.
I think there could be 3 leaders from Europe, as it was before. I would always support as well our good friend Donald Tusk from Poland, because he really understands the mentality of Russians. And it could be Merz, it could be whatever who wants. Macron maybe is ready, but I think we need to include Keir Starmer from UK, because he's the one who is leading Coalition of Willing as well.
And that's a very important point, because we've seen this week there's a sort of closer now relationship again with the UK and the EU. The UK says they want to give the safe joining this program with defence another try. Do you want them to participate in this union of defence when it comes to the EU, but also Europe?
You know, I think it's a good point where, as never before since Brexit, we are as close to UK and we need to have good ties as Europeans. I'm now speaking from European perspective, because as Europeans, we really need those good relationships. We don't need to isolate ourselves. So therefore, I think we need to put closer UK, because they are actually working together in those coalition of willing talks with Ukraine and helping a lot Ukraine as well. And this is about peace in Europe, and UK is Europe.
And so you say the UK in the safe universe mechanism, that's a good idea. It's a natural partner. They should join.
It could be, but it depends. Are UK as well then delivering some finances?
And they got to pay.
Yes, they got to pay, because those resources are from European funds, European Union funds. So if UK want to be in, they have to as well finance something of a safe instrument.
Maria today reporting for us there, and we'll hear from her a little bit later in the programme. But of course, during those talks today in Abu Dhabi, attacks are continuing to pound Ukraine, with a massive strike in Odessa just yesterday and Kiev overnight. For more, we can get up to speed with our Ukraine correspondent, Sasha Vakalina, who's here with me in the studio. Good morning, Sasha. Any results so far from the talks in Abu Dhabi? I've heard that word productive mentioned again.
Well, that's the word that we heard after the first round as well, Maeve. And as we said back then, the most productive thing about these talks is the fact that they do take place. And the day two starts and continues today in Abu Dhabi. So far, what we've heard from Volodymyr Zelensky was that there is one important result. There might be a new prisoners of war exchange that might take place as soon as today. This is very important for Ukraine also because Russia halted those exchanges somewhere by the end of last year, and Ukraine has been trying and insisting on bringing back and exchanging those prisoners of war. Zelensky also said yesterday that 55,000 of Ukrainian soldiers have been killed since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. That is why for Ukraine it's so important to have a proper, long-lasting and just deal. Let's take a listen.
Війну треба завершувати реально. Саме Росія повинна бути готова до цього.
The war must end for real. It is Russia that must be ready for this. And our partners must also be ready to ensure this with real guarantees, security guarantees, and real pressure on the aggressor. And so that the people in Ukraine can feel that the situation is really moving towards peace, towards the end of the war, and not towards the Russians using everything to their advantage and continuing their attacks.
Все собі на користь і продовжувати удар.
President Volodymyr Zelensky there. And what about the Russian side? What have they been saying, Sasha?
Well, the Russian side traditionally is blaming Ukraine for putting certain obstacles, as Moscow claims, saying that Russia does want peace. Now, they don't say what conditions do they want this peace or truce upon. An interesting message came yesterday in Russian Kremlin-affiliated media outlets saying that the US President Donald Trump's plan also includes Ukraine's possible accession to the European Union in 2027. And they are attributing this to Russian sources at the talks in Abu Dhabi. Quite interesting to hear it from Russians.
Indeed, we will follow that very closely. Sasha Vakalina, thank you so much for that update. Well, amidst all the uncertainty around ending the war in Ukraine, some good news has surfaced here in Brussels. EU countries have sealed a deal on a €90 billion loan for Ukraine. Our Jakub Janis tells us why this lifeline is so crucial.
By April, Ukraine's budget will be empty. And unable to tap into Russia's frozen assets last December, Brussels triggered Plan B, a massive €90 billion loan raised through joint debt. But not everyone will participate. Hungary, Slovakia and Czechia secured a total opt-out. So, 30 billion will keep the state running, paying doctors, teachers and pensioners. The lion's share, though, €60 billion, is for defense. And since yesterday, the deal is finally locked in. But Europeans were split. France was leading the Buy European team, and they insisted EU taxpayer money must support EU factories. After all, if billions are to be spent, they wanted the cash to stay on the continent. But Germany and the Netherlands argued Europe lacks the luxury of time. If Ukraine needs certain weaponry today, and the EU doesn't have it, Europe must buy them from somewhere else, such as South Korea, the US and the UK. And speaking of London, can they get a slice of this 90 billion pie? After yesterday's breakthrough, the answer is yes. but it is strictly pay to play. British companies can bid for these contracts, but only if London pays a fair share of the borrowing costs. So right now, only the European Parliament needs to vote. And they promised to move fast, because with the April deadline, there is no time to waste. Finally, Ukraine only repays this loan if Russia pays for the damages. And since Moscow isn't paying up, this debt might never be called in.
Jakub Janis and Jorge Lebrera reporting for us there. And as you heard, that cheque still needs the green light from the European Parliament. That could come during a special sitting on 24th of February. That's exactly 4 years since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine by Russia. But now for the view from Poland on the ongoing war and more, we hear from Rafał Trzaskowski, a former member of the European Parliament and the mayor of Warsaw since 2018. He's affiliated with Prime Minister Donald Tusk's Civic Platform Party. Rafał Trzaskowski joined me yesterday here in the studio, and I started by asking him whether he had any hope of a breakthrough in Abu Dhabi today.
Well, I hope that however this war ends, it's going to be agreed with Ukraine, and that Ukrainian priorities will be upheld, because we need to remember that it was Russia who attacked viciously Ukraine. And I think that every crazy dictator in the world is watching, whether the West will be united, whether we will be strong.
And being involved, does that mean then speaking, reopening the channels of communication with the Kremlin, as President Macron has suggested, or would that just be rewarding aggression?
I mean, the most important thing is that President Zelensky's and the voice of the Ukrainian people is heard. And I think that we cannot try to come up with ideas that are going to be unacceptable for Ukraine. This is the most important thing. And I think that we should simply focus on that and not try to come up to a solution which is going to be unacceptable for the people who are attacked, because that's going to be completely counterproductive, and it will have a negative impact on the credibility of Europe, but also on the credibility of the United States.
And there's lots at stake for Poland here, of course, a neighbouring country. Are the Europeans having enough of a say, do you believe, in these talks?
I don't think so, and I think that there will be no solution, there will be no security, there will be no rebuilding Ukraine without our involvement. So that's why it is absolutely fundamental for the Europeans to be involved and for our voice to be heard. And we also do not fudge the issue who was the aggressor. It was Russia. And we want to help the Ukrainians now in these very dire circumstances when they're being attacked all the time viciously, the civil population, my sister city Kiev and Kharkiv. And also after, when it comes to rebuilding Ukraine and opening up the European perspective for our friends.
And how are you making sure that you can keep that momentum on supporting your neighbour Ukraine, but also not harming your own security in Poland?
We are strengthening our security as much as we can. We are investing almost 5% of our GDP in defence. We are strengthening our eastern border. We are investing as much as we can. We are taking responsibility ourselves, exactly as President Trump wanted. Now we need to convince other Europeans to do the same. But at the same time, we need to be helping the Ukrainians, because they were actually fighting for our freedom, and they were providing us security. They were giving us breathing space when it comes to rebuilding our security, because the Russian threat is there. And if this war ends with Putin's success, then this is the gravest threat for the European security.
And how real is the threat that there could potentially be an invasion in your country, in Poland?
Well, I don't think that there is a great threat, because fortunately, I mean, the Russians got their teeth knocked out by the Ukrainians. But if we give them breathing space, I mean, if we give them arguments and time to actually rebuild their military, unfortunately, they might strike back. They might just wait and then come back and test our resilience. I mean, they're doing it every time, you know, every day. There is a hybrid warfare everywhere, misinformation, sabotage, and so on and so forth. We need to be ready. We need to be resilient, also when it comes to the cities. And that's what we are doing in Warsaw. We are strengthening our resilience. We're learning from our Ukrainian friends, and at the same time helping them in the time of distress when there are those temperatures minus 30 and Kiev is freezing. We're helping as much as we can.
And you mentioned President Trump earlier. What do you think of his Board of Peace? Why isn't Poland joining it?
We are looking into President Trump's initiatives, because at the end of the day, we want to keep the Americans involved. This is very, very important. This is not a question of emotions. This is not a question, we are serious people. This is not a question of judging someone's behavior at a given moment. It's a question of European security. We need to be together, because if Europe and the United States will not be together, all of our enemies, all of our foes will open champagne bottles. So we need to be aware of that.
Does this administration, though, sometimes make you feel like you have to pick or choose Brussels or Washington, D.C.?
Well, if you listen to President Trump carefully, I mean, he said Europe should take more responsibility, right? He said there should be no free riding. Well, we understand it in Poland, we understand it in the Baltic republics. So now it's a question of convincing other Europeans, okay, let's strengthen our capabilities, let's strengthen our credibility. And this is, in a sense, a response to the wishes of the American administration. And at the same time, we, of course, need to keep the Americans involved because those are our closest allies. And if the threats are elsewhere, we should be absolutely certain that those relations are as good as they can be. And even if the Americans want to focus on other parts of the world, they need to be sure that someone has their back. And it's us, the Europeans.
And we've seen the comments of Mario Draghi this week, the former head of the European Central Bank, saying that the EU needs to move from a confederation to a federation, that countries need to huddling together and moving on their own pace. What are your views on that?
I don't like these labels because they do not really describe the Union, which is, a beautiful construct because it's so original and unique. There are areas in which we need more integration, like defence, that's for sure. I'm not dogmatic. I don't think that we need more integration in every field. Maybe there are places in which we integrated ourselves too much. I mean, we need a bit more flexibility. We need to be self-sufficient. But yes, there are issues like defense, like capital markets, where we need more integration in order to be a real player in the world.
Rafał Trzaskowski there on a number of challenges facing the EU today. But another major development we're watching closely for you is the US-Iran nuclear talks that are set to take place tomorrow in Oman. Fear over further escalation in the Middle East has been a dark cloud over this year's World Government Summit taking place in Dubai, as Maria Tadeo now reports.
Good morning indeed. The second big geopolitical question of the day is, of course, Iran. That after the U.S. president said the supreme leader should be, quote, very worried if he does not agree to engage in serious talks over the country's nuclear program. That after a whole day of confusion, big confusion over whether or not a meeting between a delegation from the U.S. and Iran would go ahead and take place this week. There were big questions over the format, the timing, the location. Yesterday night, finally confirmed this bilateral meeting between Iran and the U.S. will indeed go ahead this week. It will take place on Friday in Oman. The message, however, coming out of this region in the UAE, but also the Gulf and beyond, is that a regional war can still be avoided and that this is really the time for Iran to be serious in their diplomatic engagements with the U.S. Yesterday, on that note, I spoke with the Prime Minister of Lebanon, Nawaf Salam, who told us he will not allow his country to get involved into this conflict, but also repeated this is really not the time for stability or instability, I should note, after 3 very difficult years in the Middle East. Let's take a look.
Stability of the region comes first for us. Definitely, anything that could avoid an all-out war in the region is be more than welcome. As far as Lebanon is concerned, I've said and would like to reaffirm that the question of war and peace is in the hands of the government and solely of the government. But unfortunately, I mean, we still have to take care of parts of the south that are occupied by Israel. We have to take care of daily violations of our sovereignty by Israel, and we still need to liberate number of our citizens who have been captured by Israel, and doing so only perpetuates conflict in the region, undermines my government's efforts to no, I mean not to expand state authority over the whole country, and only fuels instability.
And you can catch the rest of that interview on Euronews.com. But that does bring this edition of Europe Today to an end. Thanks for tuning in. Bye from Brussels.